Okay, so Wowhead has a DPS tier list as this. So what I wanted to do is see if this is accurate. You guys got me all confused with the CATA thing. So what I wanted to do today is just really quickly look through WoW logs and see if this is actually accurate or not. Because a lot of this was the tier list that came out before, but I feel like this is the tier list from 10 years ago or whatever. But I don't know. I kind of want to just look and see on each fight who the top parsers are, and then kind of make like a little spreadsheet of it, and give everybody a ranking and see who's coming up the most. So let's just pull up. I'll pull up like another spreadsheet here to take notes on. And let's just go one boss at a time and see, like, you know, what classes are coming up the most. So obviously, I mean, I see like a lot of survival hunter here. And then there are some classes that can kind of sprinkle their way in, but it's mainly survival hunters on Conclave all around. There are some outstanding, like, you know, Fire Mage. There are some Unholy DKs. And there are some Demo Locks. It looks like there's one Paladin, a few Arms Warriors, but not a ton. Let's go to Alakir and see if it's the same. So right off the top on Alakir, I'm seeing Arms Warriors. I'm seeing mainly Elemental Shaman, Arms Warriors, DKs. More of the same, right? Elisham, Arms Warrior, DK. And it's all Unholy DK. Holy, one Shadow Priest too, huh? What in the world? That guy's cranking. There's a Boomkin in the top 6. That's pretty insane. A couple of survival hunters, they're just not great on this particular boss because they have trouble like being in melee and stuff. Yeah, but we're a lot of people are starting to get 4 sets now, so we want to do the tier list for the 4 set. I mean, there's a rogue sprinkled in there here and there. But for the most part, it's a lot of Arms Warriors, DKs, and Ellie Shamans on this boss. We'll try to keep it to like 3 or 4 per boss. Just to see, you know, who's in the top. Okay, let's go down to Omnitron Defense. This is Fire Mage Heaven. Fire Mage, Ellie Shaman again. And a couple of exceptional players just kind of sprinkled in here and there. But for the most part, it looks like Fire Mage number 1 and then Ellie Shaman number 2 here. I didn't realize Fire Mage could do this much damage. This guy did 106k DPS. What? Like, what in the actual F? 106k. That is ridiculous. How did he do so much damage? I mean, obviously there's the damage amp. They must have been milking the damage amp and the poison. The only way you could do this much damage on Toxitron is if you get, well, on this boss is if you get Toxitron and Arcanatron at the same time and you lost. Okay, I mean, a bunch of exceptional players. I mean, from right now, like B tier in my mind, I'm seeing Shadow Priest, Boomy, Red, like honestly, like A tier, I'm seeing Shadow Priest, Boomy, Red. I mean, these are the classes that I'm seeing a lot, so I put this in S tier. I see these a lot right now. Survival Hunter, Fire Mage, Unholy DK, Demo Lock, Arms Warrior, Ellie Shaman, Arms Warrior again, Unholy DK again, Fire Shaman, Ellie Shaman again. Fire Mage again and S tier. I mean, right now, this is sort of like what I'm seeing is there are some occasional Shadow Priests, Boomies, and Rets sprinkled into the top 100. And then there are also some Rogues. Now, Rogues are actually S tier on some fights, though. That's the thing in Cataclysm is Rogues are going to be S tier, like on the next pull. On Magma, it's just going to be all Rogues. And then I think I would probably put Combat Rogues in the S tier or definitely number 1 for A+, because Their two target is just insane. It's unmatched. I mean, yeah, you have a couple of exceptional players in there as well, but it's just all rogues on Magma. Atramedes, it's going to be Fire Mage, Ellie, Demo, all the way. And Survival Hunter, Fire Mage, Ellie. One rogue in there. I would probably put Asa Rogue at A tier and Combat Rogue as S tier. Just because they're able to do so much damage single target, and they're able to do two target. So Combat Rogues, I would put them at S tier right now. Let's look at Chimaeron. This is a pretty much pure single target fight. It looks with very minimal movement, and it's more of the same. Fire Mage, Unholy DK, Ellie with some Asa Rogue sprinkled in there, some exceptional Shadow Priests, one Affliction Warlock. I'll put Affliction Warlock in there. If I see a class come up like one time in the top 100 on certain fights, you know, I start to put them in the B tier right off the top. Maloriak. It's going to be more Arms Warriors, Fire Mages. Wow, look at the Fire Mages really, really starting to take over here. The Fire Mages are really coming in hot. Literally. Nefarian's End is a Shadow Priest. There's a bunch of Shadow Priests on this fight that are in the top 100. And some Affliction Locks. Some Affliction Locks are starting to come in. Nef is a strange fight. It definitely breaks the meta. You have a lot of different classes, like even Rep Paladin showing up big here. A sub rogue. Like, this is just crazy. You have every single type of rogue in the top 100 in this fight. Yeah, S phase, because you can do more damage in the phase while he's up, and maybe you can dot several different mobs. So Aflock's starting to shine a bit here in certain situations. I might even move Affliction Lock up to A tier if I start to see them a bit more often in some of these other fights. Halfus is going to be all Fire Mage and Combat Rogue, which is why I have a Fire Mage and Combat Rogue at the top. To me, it's looking like Fire Mage is the clear number one. And then it's between Hunter or Unholy DK for number 2. Combat Rogues are very high up there in specific fights. Ellie Shamans are also, I think, Arms Warriors at the bottom of the S tier. And then Combat Rogues are all S tier. But they need a certain fight, right? You have some, okay, in this particular fight, Thoralion and Valiona, you have some Demo Locks that are starting to come into play here because I guess they're able to hit both targets. Affliction Locks starting to shine on 2 targets that are not really stacked up very close together. But you even have Demonology Locks that are still beating them. So Boomies are also doing good here, multi-target dotting, which is why I have Boomies in like the low A tier. Boomies and Affliction Locks able to do more damage in a lot of classes here because they're able to dot both targets that are kind of far away from each other. So definitely a unique situation there. Ascendant Council is Unholy DK all the way. I'm actually kind of wondering why Unholy DK is so good on this fight. Because it's 2 targets that occasionally have to be separated. No, this is a 2 target fight. Council is 2 target. You stack the bosses together and you split them during Glaciate. And then it eventually tapers off into a single target fight later on. I think it's just because Unholy can still do damage with its dots, and while they're spread, they can still be doing damage to both targets. Yeah. Maybe that's what it is. So Unholy DK, definitely good here. And then, of course, Combat Rogue on 2 target is going to be blasting. Cho'Gall is going to be all Fire Mages because of the mind control thing being broken. And then Sinestra is going to be all Shadow Priest because of the ads. And this is why I have Shadow Priest in the A tier. It's just because they're used for specific fights in this tier. And they're just good. Like, they're just useful. Like, whenever there's a Shadow Priest fight, it's going to also be a Boomkin fight and an Affliction Warlock fight. So you start to see these three classes shine on certain bosses. But as always, Fire Mage is still going to be good. Demo Lock is always good. And Unholy DK and Ellie Sham is pretty much always good. As well as Hunter. There's not really a fight when these four are just not, like, these five are just always in the top 100 on pretty much every single fight. These five are like the undisputed champs of this expansion. If you're playing any of these five characters, you're good. This is the breakdown on Archon of DPS tier lists for Heroic and how much throughput that they're capable. Popularity, parses, and DPS. So you have Combat Rogue doing the highest amount of damage overall. So Combat Rogue can be the single-handedly most valuable class in the entire raid on a 2-target fight like Magma or any fight where there's more than one target, or if it's just 2-target, Combat Rogue becomes one of the most valuable classes. So let's go ahead and make this tier list and see how it came out. We have Arcane Mage is kind of down here as well. So my number one for this expansion, you know, this is a 2024 tier list. So there's been a lot of tier lists and stuff like that have come out, but this is for, you know, currently we're in week 3. People are starting to get gear. It's 2024. People know how to min-max classes better. So this is the 2024 tier list on usefulness of each class in the current raids. And this might change in Firelands, so we might have to do one for Firelands as well. But as of right now, if you were going to start playing CATA, or if you're thinking about making an alt, I'd highly recommend making one of these classes. These are absolutely the best classes. I think it's Fire Mage, Survival Hunter, Unholy DK. Let's do Unholy DK. And then Ellie Shaman into Demo Lock. And then, not every single fight, but Combat Rogue is good enough to be God tier on certain fights. Also, Arms Warrior is pretty damn good, but we might put them at A+ or at the end. They could go, Arms Warrior could go here. If you pick anything from the God tier, you're going to be fine. Combat Rogue is up there. That's my tier list in order for just overall DPS and usage, popularity, and like what's going to be good on every single fight. This is also okay, but very good on certain fights. It's going to be number 1 is probably gonna be Assassin Rogue. Okay, so I would put Assassin Rogue because they're really good at single target. Shadow Priest, Boomy, Ret, and Affliction. They all are useful and they become S tier on certain fights. So let's put Boomy. Where's the Boom Chickens at? Boomy. I think Shadow Priest is ranked a bit higher than most people think that they are. In my personal opinion, Shadow Priest is just really doing well. I'd probably put them like right here. And then I put the Affliction Warlocks in this category as well for A tier. Underneath that, these are the classes that don't really get played that much. And if we're referring to their output that they're doing here, we have Frost and Feral doing a bit more DPS output. You don't see them as much. Frost does have some very specific things that it can do, like AoE slows and stuff like that. Ferals can multi-bleed certain targets, and they're okay. Enhancement Shaman is actually putting up 30k DPS. I mean, that's pretty good. They're just not used very much, and you don't really see them that much in the raid. So for those reasons, I mean, I would put their utility is really good. If you put Cat Druid and then you put an enhancement shaman here, they can be okay. But they're not, they're not going to wow anybody with their DPS. And after that, we do have a Frost Mage in our guild that's doing really good damage, and he does fine in the raid. So I was actually pleasantly surprised to see a C tier DPS. I wouldn't even say that there's any C tier or F tier classes, to be honest. I would personally just put the rest of the classes in full normal. And there really isn't any rhyme or reason to the order for this. But these are the classes that you're just going to see the least of. And some of them can be good in certain situations. But I really just don't see these classes played too much. And, that none class is like terrible, but they do have significantly less DPS than a lot of the other classes. So this would be my DPS tier list for Cataclysm. If you're thinking about playing a class, I'd highly recommend, you play one of the ones in the top 2 tiers. There really isn't too much use for these classes, with maybe the exception of like an enhancement shaman in your raid. Bear tanks are really good, and you don't really need any of these classes down here for any specific reason. They don't provide anything to the group that some of the other classes don't already have. I mean, Frost DK has a specific niche role that would be decent in some raids, but the damage output is just nowhere near as good as Unholy. So for those reasons, these are the winners of this tier. And this is, I think, the most accurate Cataclysm tier list you can go with for now. And yeah, if we'll put this up on YouTube so people can have that to reference in case people were wondering like what class to play and why. Let's put the statistics up here and just take a look at over a range of a day in the 95th percentile. It looks like fire mages are already taking over, guys. You give fire mages a little bit of gear and they're already taking over, because they were like 3rd in week 1. They were like 3rd, and now we're week 2 or week 3 or week 2.5, and they're already number 1, which was my prediction all along. At the max percentile, you have survival hunters still able to out DPS fire mages, just because I feel like fire mages really don't have all of their gear yet. But I do think that fire mage is going to be the premier DPS. Yeah, hunters absolutely crank. They absolutely crank. I think that survival hunter is literally one of the best classes in this expansion after fire mage.